Thanks for the introduction. I'm pretty excited. This is my first time at Republica, and thanks for the opportunity to present some of the concepts that we have thought about in the last year. So before I really start with my presentation, I see a few familiar faces. How many of you have been to the Bosch exhibition area where we have showcased our show car? Okay, good. So I'll talk about this Bosch concept car during my presentation, around 40 minutes. The way I'm going to present, I'll start with the major trends which are impacting the automotive industry. And then I'll talk about what you saw as beyond driving. I hope something comes on the screen. Yes. So beyond driving, the topic beyond driving means that how are the cars in the future going to look like? So I'm going to talk about how the automotive interiors are going to look like, and we at Bosch call it as the third living space. So I'm going to talk what do we mean by third living space. And at the end, I'll show you some of the use cases. If some of you have not really been at the Bosch show car, then you can see some of the use cases right here. So let's start off. So automated or autonomous driving is something most of you have heard of. This is potentially one of the most disruptive innovations, or it has the potential to be one of the most disruptive innovations for the automotive industry. The technology for automated driving has progressed so fast in the past years that we no longer wonder whether there'll be driverless cars in the future. It's not whether, but when it will happen. And when it happens, this potential disruption, what I was talking is, when this happens, it is going to impact the way we travel, the way business models are going to look like. It has an impact on traffic congestion, emissions, and so on. So what you see here is really a vision. This is really driverless cars. But the way towards driverless cars is not going to happen overnight. There are going to be different levels of automation. For example, the regulatory authorities in USA have defined 5 levels of automation. Level 0 of automation is complete manual, and level 4 is something like that, where it's complete driverless cars. In between, you will see the automation levels in the car progressively moving forward, where the driver still has some kind of responsibility in the car. So one typical example could be that you are in a traffic jam, and the car wants to take over control from you, because however passionate you are about car driving, when you are stuck in a traffic jam, your passion comes down considerably. Yeah. And when this passion comes down, if the car can take over that part of the drive where it is really boring, where you would rather do something else, that would be something very nice to have. So now, for the user inside the car, what does it mean? So when the car says, I will take over from you, fine, I can give control to the car. Now, when the traffic jam is over, the car has to give back control to me. Now, during this time, what am I doing? Am I reading a newspaper? Have I gone drowsy? Am I sleeping? These are the kind of factors which we should consider when the takeover, handover functions take place. So I'll go to the next trend, which is electrified, which has been there for quite some time. But in the next 10 years, we will see considerable amount of change coming here, especially because of the advancements in battery technologies, whether it's in terms of the costs, whether it's in terms of the volume, size, weight. We'll see considerable improvements here. Also, there'll be more and more regulatory restrictions coming on emissions, and this will also accelerate the push for electrified. And finally, the third key factor will be the development of the infrastructure. So these three key factors will really push this trend, push the automobile industry further in this direction. The third trend which I wanted to talk about is connected. Connected means always online. It's not just about accessing your apps, your social media in the car, but it's a little bit beyond when you talk about the car. When we talk about connected, we talk about predictive driving, which means that you get real-time data from the internet about what lies beyond your line of sight, which means you're driving, and beyond the curve in front of you, is there a traffic jam which is getting built up? Or in the tunnel in front of you, is the road getting more icy? So these are the kind of things which you get from the internet in real time and helps you to drive much more predictively. It also brings about a kind of predictiveness about how much range you have. So if you have an electric car, you can also determine if there's going to be a traffic jam. What does it mean for me going to the destination? So connected really brings about a lot of real-time information which you can really use for planning your current journey. The second part of connected is what we call as predictive diagnostics, which means that the functioning of the components of your car can be monitored on a regular basis, and information can be given to you ahead of time, whether you need to do preventive maintenance of your car. When do you really have to take your car to the service station? So these are some of the kind of things, kind of services or functions which we will see in the future. Of course, there are challenges. When we talk about connectivity, one of the key challenges is security, whether someone is going to hack into my car. Can this person start operating the car sitting in his small room in a hotel? So these are challenges. From the security perspective, there are a lot of advances which are happening at the automotive manufacturers and at the tier ones, where we are looking at security from a real holistic fashion, which means that you look at security in the way we develop our products, in the way we manufacture it, and also for the during operation, whether it's connecting to the cloud or giving updates of software over the air. So these are things which are happening in the area of connectivity. Last and not least is the impact of consumer electronics on the automotive industry. I talked about our show car, the Bosch show car. The so-called world premiere, I would say, was in the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. The reason why we did it is not just because we wanted to do it there, but because all the automotive manufacturers and suppliers now showcase their latest technologies in the CES. So the automotive world, the number of functions, the kind of electronics and hardware that's coming into the automotive world is strongly influenced by the consumer electronics world. So we showcase this in the consumer electronics world. But there is a major gap which we see between the consumer world and the automotive world. If you look at your smartphones, you see a new model coming out every 6 months. The life cycle of consumer devices are very short. However, when you have a car, the life cycle is pretty big. You might not like your smartphone and check it out 3 months after you buy it. However, the life cycle of a car is much longer. You'd ideally like to hold it longer than those 3 or 6 months. Now, the challenge here is users are somehow used to getting new features, new updates on your devices. So you'd also expect to see new functions in your car, the way the car looks like. You'd like to see that. So this is one big challenge which we at the automotive industry are looking at. So these were the key trends which are impacting the automotive industry. Now I'll come to the core topic of my talk, what I said as third living space. What is this third living space we are talking about? The third living space is, we see it as a space which redefines the boundary between the car, the place where we work, and our home. The third living space is a space where you, as a driver or a passenger in a car, you feel more secure, more safe. The third living space is a space where we see that the interiors are so personalized for you that you feel that it's almost an extension of yourself. The third living space we feel is a space where when you sit inside the car, you have a seamless interaction with the different devices in the car in a very holistic fashion. Now, all this was kind of marketing statements. Yeah? So let me go a little bit into I would say four key areas which I'll talk about, which defines this third living space. So one aspect is what we call as no frontiers. What does this mean? I talked about connectivity earlier. When we talked about connectivity, we talked about how connectivity can enable different features inside the car. No frontiers means that the boundaries which are existing today are slowly disappearing. The boundaries between what I can do in my car, how can I connect from my car to my home, from my car to the place where I work, between the real world in the car and the virtual world, or the communication between cars, or communication from the car to the infrastructure. These are all the areas where connectivity is affecting, and we believe that slowly, in the future, these boundaries will disappear. I'll give you an example of how connectivity and automated driving can come together. For example, I talked about a traffic jam earlier. Again, passion low, traffic jam. I'm sitting there. The car tells me, please, can I take over? I say, yeah. The car starts driving by itself. Now, I have a whole lot of time with me. What do I do during this time? This is the time when this no frontiers is going to come into pictures. I decide whether I want to look at how my home is. Is there someone around my home? Is it secure? Or I say, should I access some documents, what I was working on? Or you can go to the extent that you say, maybe I'll do a video conference with my colleagues from my car. Yeah? So these are the kind of features which we do not think about today, but these are the features which could be made possible in the future. I'll go to the next one. I take care of you. The car says, I will take care of you. What does that mean? It's all about safety and security. So if you have noticed, you will probably, when you get into your car, most of the technology that enables these kind of safety functions are all under the hood. You will not be able to notice it. But the number of sensors, may it be radar sensors, video sensors, laser sensors, ultrasonic sensors, there are so many sensors which are being integrated in the car today that the car is able to really have a fantastic perception, a 360-degree perception of your environment as you're traveling, far, far superior to our own perceptions. So when you are driving, your perception is here. Maybe when you look here, but not, you'll not be looking behind. So the cars are really equipped so much with technology that they're going to give you this perception. And how can we use this perception to make you feel more secure? Especially when we go in the direction of automated driving. I'm not sure. This seems to be an elite crowd. How many of you have sat actually in an automated car? Great. 1, 2. Not bad. That's pretty good. This transition, transition of going from a manually driven car where you have the complete control and getting into a car which seems to have its own will, which seems to have its own mind, that transition is going to take some time. I'll give you an example. My wife drives my car during the weekend, and I sit beside her. And for example, when she starts to park, I get some kind of a funny feeling. And it's probably the same way for her when I park, right? And just imagine, I trust her completely, she trusts me completely, yeah? But when I give over my car to her, why do I develop this funny feeling? Another example, I'm driving. As I drive, I see a pedestrian crossing, and I see a small child with a dog crossing the pedestrian crossing. And when I see from here, I know, hey, there's a child coming, and I know for sure, I see the child, I'm going to brake. And I'm going to ensure that after the child passes, I'm going to drive over. Now, when I'm driving in an automated mode, I'm not sure whether the car has seen this child, whether the car will really brake when it nears the pedestrian crossing. These are the kind of things which come into my mind when I'm sitting in the car. So we need to somehow propagate this trust from the car. The car has to say that, hey, I've seen this person, I've seen the child, don't worry, I'm going to brake. That gives a tremendous amount of confidence for me inside the car. Yeah? So that's what I was talking about, that the car takes care of you. The next topic, what I'm going to speak about, is extension of myself. This is all about personalization. Personalization to an extent where you can start with simple kinds of personalization. Yeah, you can say, I like pink. My colleague Janine likes pink. So when she sits in her car, if she gets everything in pink color, hey, she's a great. My day is going to be great today. Yeah. It can go beyond. It's not just about the color, but it's also probably about the kind of music that I like to hear. So in our Bosch show car, we have something called as a mood wheel. Yeah, you have so many different kinds of music. You might have music on your cloud. You can have music on your SD card. You can have music on board. And when I would like to listen to some particular music, I say, hey, I want to listen to Madonna. And the car starts to detect a pattern. This guy listens to Madonna every Monday morning. Yeah. And the next Monday morning, it automatically says, it gives me a choice of all Madonna songs. And then I say, hey, great. Yeah. So this is the kind of personalization where you can go into. The next level of personalization is how the car can start understanding your behavior, understanding where you go, when you go. It might be a little dangerous sometimes, but it'll get to understand you far better and make you feel that, hey, this car is really an extension of myself. In our Bosch show car, we have done it in a little bit dramatic fashion. What we have done is you enter the car. There are 7 different screens. You have a central display, and you just take your thumb with a fingerprint, just press on the screen, and it's as if your DNA flows into the screen and just distributes it across the car. And suddenly, with a nice, welcoming sound, you feel, I've been welcomed so nicely by my car. You can name your car, you can call it nice names. It'll also respond with your pet names. But it's all about the extent to which we can personalize. So we'll see a lot of intelligent HMI solutions in the future which will make this possible. Don't worry, we'll not see the driver in mid-air suspension in the future. It's just a way of representing it. By holistic interaction, what we mean is you see that the number of functions which are being integrated in a car are rising exponentially. And all these functions, if they want to interact with the driver at the same time, On one hand, it results in information overload. You are actually supposed to keep your eyes on the road, your hands on the wheel, but with all this kind of information overload, it goes in the negative direction. So we have to somehow ensure that the kind of information which is being passed on to the driver, the way we interact with the driver, this has to be controlled in a fashion. The second thing is, we talk about a lot of interaction technologies, whether it is touch, whether you use gestures. I'm not sure how many of you have heard about this. How many of you know that we can also control using your eyes? Could you raise your hands? Pretty good. Oh, I'm impressed now. So the first time really I used eye gaze interaction was I had a laptop in front of me, and they told you could control things with your eyes. I said, let me check it out. And it was a game of Space Invaders where you had to save Earth from invading spaceships. And when this was happening, I was just sitting in front of my desk, just looking at all those wicked ships coming and just exploding them, blasting them out of space. It gave me an immense sense of satisfaction that I could just do that, just looking at them. I was just trying to see if I brought that in my car and some person just overtook me in a wrong fashion. I just look at him and, of course, it's not possible, right? But the thing is, you need to see how can we integrate these kind of technologies in a car in a meaningful way, in a way which really helps you. And we have done it in our show car in one fashion. I'll show you a use case also later. So this is one part. But when we talk about holistic, what does holistic mean? Holistic means that we are adapting the interaction with the person, not just from the function perspective or from the technology perspective, but also looking at the state of the driver, whether he's feeling drowsy, whether he's overloaded with information. These are the kind of things which we look at. Second aspect is, what is the kind of situation the driver is finding himself or herself in? We look at the situation. And also the environment. How's the environment? Is the drive currently happening in the night? Is it foggy outside? Is it raining? Just imagine old lady driving late in the night, foggy, comes to an intersection. The car wants to give a warning that there is a speeding car coming from the right. How do we give the warning? Or there's a young guy listening to loud music, or similar situation. How would you like to warn this person? So these are the kind of things you need to consider it, state of the driver, environment, situation, and adapt the interaction in that fashion. So this is all about how holistic interaction is going to look like. So I'll now quickly talk about how we created the third living space in our car. So in the automotive industry, from long time, we have been focusing on usability. Usability is all about efficiency, effectiveness. I have to give satisfaction of use. All the things have to be done in a way that it happens inside 6 seconds. I should always have my hands on the wheel, eyes on the road. Yeah? It's very important. Yeah? In a car, it's very important because your main task is driving and not interacting. Yeah? When you're using your mobile, your main task is interacting with the mobile. So there's a fundamental difference between how you interact with a device and the way you interact with a car. So keeping this in mind, the automotive industry always had usability in mind. But after the iPhone, the expectations of users, how they want to interact with devices have drastically changed. And the automotive industry also, I would say, post-iPhone era, has also looked at what we call as user experience, which means that it's usability plus many other things. So we talk about emotions. We talk about perceptions. We talk about beliefs. How can we make the complete experience of the person when that person is sitting in the car better? How can we give more positive experiences? How can we reduce negative experiences in the car? And usability, if you really look at it, it's about when you are using it. And user experience, there can be many definitions. This is our definition. User experience is more about before the use, during the use, and after the use. How can you define the interaction, the experience for the complete cycle? So this is something which we also do. So what we do is we really discuss with users. We do user research. They tell us what they feel, but we also observe the users, because sometimes you say, is it good? Yeah, it's good. And you can see from the body language, this person was not really convinced that it is good. Yeah? So you really need to try to read between the lines when you are doing user research, and especially in the context of use, which means that you do that at the place where the user is really going to use that function. So you know how the user is going to feel when that use actually takes place. So I'll quickly just go to this slide, because this is what we did for our Bosch showcase. So we started sometime in April with the user research and so on, but the actual car was developed from August until we flew to Las Vegas in January. So what you see in this spiral here is really our user experience process. So we plan the user experience activities at the beginning, and then, like I mentioned, understand context of the use, which means we extensively discuss with the users, observe the users, try to understand what is it that they're feeling, which are the areas where they feel they really require a solution or they see a problem. And then we synthesize insights. So we form clusters, what we call as opportunity areas, where we can offer solutions to the users. And then we ideate and realize, which means we do rapid prototypes, test it with the users, and if the users find it good, then we integrate it in the car. Good. So now I'll really go inside what we call as the third living space. So the first use case, what I would like to show, which I talked about earlier, was a video conference in the car. So let's see if this works. No.
We are entering the highway.
Incoming video conference call. Automated driving available.
Some colleagues trying to reach me in a video conference call. Since I'm driving in manual mode, I cannot pick up the call. But the system offered me, we are driving on a highway. The system could take over for automated drive, and that's what I'm doing right now. You can also see it here in the cluster display. We are still in manual driving mode, but the A indicates that automated drive is possible. So again, by putting both thumbs at these buttons,
automated driving engaged.
Now system took over. I can take the hands from the steering wheel, and I can accept the call by a simple gesture. Here you can see two of my colleagues being in a video conference. And since we are now in automated driving mode, I can make use of this great infrastructure in a complete different way. I can use it as a complete working environment, also addressing the passenger display, for example. I can also select some documents which are being discussed during the presentation and expand them over the displays. And as you can see here, with the help of the different interaction technologies that we have and the large number of displays, I have a better working environment than I have in office, because this position is optimized for the driving position and everything is around me as a driver.
So this was a use case, what I told you earlier. What you might have noticed here, or you might not have noticed, that's why I want to make it clear. You saw at the beginning that the car informed the driver yeah, automated driving mode is now available. So it's an information to the driver, it's now available. Now, it's up to the driver whether he or she wants to use it. And this handover from manual to automated should also happen in a particular fashion, which is, at least say, I do not want my wife says, oh, he's driving so bad, get into automated mode. Yeah? But it should be in a very particular fashion. So here, the way was, you hold the steering wheel, there are 2 buttons, you hold both the buttons pressed for 3 seconds, and then the car gets into automated mode. So there's a particular way you go into automated mode. The other thing which you noticed, of course, was the video conference, where you were really able to use the complete infrastructure. So you could really use it like a workplace. You had different displays at the side, where the person could choose the documents and then with simple gestures push the content of the documents on the different screens. So this is one use case. Let's go to the next use case. Here we talk about connectivity to smart home.
Incoming smart home call.
Someone is there at our house.
Automated driving available.
Someone rang the bell at our house, and the Bosch security system is forwarding the call directly into our car. Since I'm driving in manual mode, I cannot take the call. The only option that I have is to cancel the call. But the system offered me to take over since we are driving on a highway. So that's what we're doing right now.
Automated driving engaged.
I gave control to the system. Now I'm being driven in an automated way. I can take off the hands from the steering wheel, and now I can start the conversation with whoever is waiting there at the door. So let's see what he wants. Oh, I know him. He wants to provide a package. And for this, he needs access to my house. Let's check different perspectives from the video cameras. There I can see he's alone. I know him pretty well. He comes at least 2 times a week to provide some packages. Now I can open the door for him. Again, I have to confirm this with a fingerprint. So in case someone else took the car, he won't be able to gain access to the house. And as you can see, the door in the background closes and the front door opens. Now he can step in, he can drop the package. He needs a kind of confirmation that he has provided the package. For this, I'm sending a fingerprint to him. With the help of the magic mirror in the hallway, he receives the confirmation, takes it over in his system. So he has a confirmation, he's leaving the house, the door closes automatically. Again, I check different camera perspective that he really left. Everything's fine, so I can now stop the conversation.
So here it was more of no frontiers, a combination of how the car is able to seamlessly connect to a smart home, and also some kind of security where you really used your fingerprint to authenticate that you can open your front door. You saw gestures with which you can control the cameras of your house to see whether the person who's in front of your house, who's standing there, is he alone? Are there other people with him who are probably outside the first camera's range? So these are things which you could probably configure, manage, and monitor from your car. The next use case is about cooperative driving mode and safety.
We are driving in corporate driving mode, which means with the help of the driver assistance systems, we are helping him to guide his attention.
Right.
For example, there's a pedestrian crossing the street. And our system helps him also with ambient light and the information in the head-up display to guide his attention in the right time to the right place. This is also something that driver beginners have to learn. And with the intelligence and the knowledge that we have with all the driver assistance systems in this car, we can support him. Whether it's with the help of lane keeping support to keep his attention high, or making use of the ambient light if a car passes nearby as an extension to the blind spot detection. Also, young drivers might easily get distracted by using whatever other devices or they have in their mind. And if they get too close to another vehicle, we can also make use of ambient light and acoustic and visual warning and head-up display to keep the attention high.
So here, the use case was about how can we personalize the car for someone who's learning to drive, learning to use all these safety systems. It's pretty new. How can we communicate it in a way? For example, in our show car, we used ambient light for, the person is not really paying attention and comes very close to the car in front of him. How can we warn him? The last one is about different way of interaction with the car. Let me see. It's working.
As you can see there in the center display, there is some information about one of my colleagues. I want to get additional information about him. But since I'm driving in manual state,
Prepare to turn right. Turn right.
Since I'm driving manual mode, I want to address this information in a non-distractive way. So by looking at the road, with a simple gesture, I can activate the eye gaze feature. As you can see, depending on which screen I'm looking at, the center display or the cluster display, it's been highlighted. And now with a short gaze towards the central display and with a gesture, I can now expand the information.
Left.
I can now expand the information to the cluster display. And now it's on me as a driver to decide when it's the right time to read this. And here I can easily see that my colleague will be in office on time and we can have the meeting as scheduled. With a swipe gesture, I can move back the information to the central display. And with another gesture, I can switch off the gaze feature. And this is one example of how we combine different interaction technologies to access such level of information and how to distribute it among different displays. It's always the same type of gesture with which we address the system, and depending on the gaze where we are looking at, it decides whether it's affecting an application in cluster display or in central display.
So this was an example of how we combined eye gaze interaction. It's not for controlling. We have found out in our tests with users that it's more easier for us to use eye gaze to identify where the user is looking at. So in this case, the car is able to make out which display I am looking at. And then if I want to shift information from one display to the other, I just make a simple directional gesture. And this gesture is now interpreted by the system is meant for that display. And when I do not want that information, for example, in my central cluster, I just do this. It knows that I'm looking at this display and then the directional gesture. So a combination of this is going to make it more intuitive in our perspective. So what we have done with this show car, what the kind of concepts, the kind of use cases, what I explained to you, is not what we think will definitely come in a car. These are ideas, these are concepts which we developed after discussing with users. And we use this car and the use cases as a means, as an instrument to discuss with people like you. How do you feel about it? Is this in the right direction? Do you think it's absolute bullshit? If it is absolute bullshit, then we would like to understand why. If you say it's great, we would like to understand why. Yeah. So it's a means of a dialogue for us to get to understand users and technology and bring them both closer together. Because if we just focus on technology, we'll come out with great features, which at the end will lead to no satisfaction. So bringing the users and technology together is one of our main aims with this instrument. And that was also one of the reasons why we gladly took the opportunity of presenting this here at the Republica. So thank you for listening.
Thank you very much for this very interesting presentation. And now there's the possibility to ask some questions. Yes?
Well, thank you very much for that interesting talk. I got two main questions. First, there's lots of talk about information overload, about people always having to be reachable for work, and to be honest, I find the idea of having to take conference calls even while on the road to be quite scary. And I wonder how much research has been put into how much connectivity is really wanted by customers, especially while driving, while going from A to B. That's question number one. Question number two would be a more general, well, actually it's the same thing. Do people in general, because I know it's not true for me, really want to focus on everything but driving while being in a car? Because all we've seen so far was about, okay, I engage autonomous mode, I take my eyes off the road, and I just focus on whatever else, music, taking a parcel delivery, whatever. So I'm kind of wondering, what about driving?
Yeah, so I completely share your opinion too. There are a set of users who say, when I'm in the car, I would like to focus on my driving. I would like to focus on what I'm doing. There's a conscious acceptance that when I enter the car, I should not access certain things, certain functions. But there's also, we see a set of users who say the car is an interference in my life. When I go from point A to point B, I would not like to get disconnected from what I'm doing. So what we are trying to find out is, what is the segment of users? We will have all segments of users using the car. And the idea is, can we offer what you call mass customization, which means that depending on the profile of the user who sits in the car, is it possible to personalize the car for that person? Which means that you can have that feature, but that feature will probably not be available or recommended to a user who would not like to use it. But there's no one, I would say, silver bullet answer saying that this is exactly what a user does in a car. So there will be different segments of users, and it will be our goal to address as many user segments as possible inside the car.
I have a question concerning security, because I'm a little bit concerned about all the information I have to, or information I got to give the car in order to use it. Yeah. And I just wonder if you're thinking about very secure systems on the one hand, well, probably of course, but on the other hand, do you think about systems that the car and only the car needs to know that information? For example, what is my point A? What is my point B? What is my fingerprint? What is everything else? So does that car have to talk to the internet, talk to your company, talk to any other company? Or do you have closed security environment around the car that maybe I trust my car, but you know, I can get rid of all the information that is surrounded by it? Thank you.
So I'll answer that in two parts. The first part is I'll talk to you how we are ensuring security. Yeah. The second one is also about, I think you had two questions, two parts. One is about security and the other is about data privacy. Yeah. So about security, when we develop our products, we develop it right. We address the software, how our architecture is going to look like to ensure security. Our hardware, we define something called as trusted hardware modules, trusted zones. And we look at what we call as security risk analysis. We do a comprehensive security risk analysis. What are all the kind of use cases? What are the kind of access points one could have, whether it's over the communication channel, whether it's when you are updating the software. So we look at all this and build it into the product development. So we make it in a secure manner. The second one is, For example, you are using, say, key encryption. You use key management, public key, private key kind of an infrastructure. How do I integrate that into my device in a secure manner? So even at our production plants, you have a server which is offline, which can generate these keys and insert these keys into the hardware which we are delivering. And the third one is when you are doing actually software updates, how can you ensure that this update or this connectivity is secure? For example, Bosch has bought a firm called as eScript, which specializes in security. They have been doing extremely good work in the area of security for the past 10 years. So we are really integrating these solutions in the product. The second part about data privacy, Bosch itself has recently announced our own cloud solution, our own server, which is made available to the users in the car, for example, for a car manufacturer. And the cloud location, the server location itself is in Stuttgart, Germany. So everything is under the German and European Union Data Privacy Act. There are three key pillars of this, apart from the fact that you have this secure private cloud. One is the data of the users. Is it very transparent to the user? When is my data getting uploaded or used up by the system? Where it gets stored and what is it used for? And when the user says, I do not want this data, can the data be deleted? So these are the four key aspects which we look at from the Bosch perspective. So I hope I've answered your question.
First of all, I would like to thank you for the nice presentation. In my opinion, it was a very concrete dream what you showed us, so thank you very much. My question is going in direction of communication. I think that the current situation is already so that you do conferences, you do communication, you do several things in the car. So it's very clear the next steps. My question is the realization of all this communication which is possibly in the car of the future. So think of the current situation, you do a phone call and quite often you don't have any connectivity. I worked 3 years in Chennai in India and there the infrastructure is even worse. So all these nice features are nice, but they rely on an IT infrastructure, on a network infrastructure, which we even now, 2016, do not have. So how do you go on with this problem?
Yeah, I share your views completely. I'm also from India. I've been staying here for the past 6 years, so I can understand what you mean. I think one aspect what we can control is of course the kind of technologies that we can build up, but I completely agree that we also need a backend, the kind of infrastructure which is provided. That's why I mentioned earlier in my presentation also that when we talk about these trends like electrified or connectivity, I think it's very important that over the next 10 years, optimistically looking that these solutions or these problems have concrete solutions.
I was wondering if there are thoughts about who's responsible if there happen some accidents while I drive in an automated way.
Very, very difficult to answer this question. There are multiple aspects of this. One is in terms of liability, who takes the liability, and the other one is also something which is also ethical. For example, there have been questions. I'm only going to answer you with questions, yeah, because I really do not have the answers. One is is about liability, who's responsible. There have been manufacturers in the past who have said, for liability, I will take responsibility. So probably that might get cleared. There are other aspects, like ethical aspects, where there is an unavoidable situation where the car is going to crash. Maybe there's a bicycle in front of you. Do I crash into this bicycle rider, or I take a left, there's an old lady going there, do I crash into her, or there's a child playing on the right side, do I take a right? Now, it's very difficult situation. I think we will, I do not know whether we'll find the true answers. We are confronted also with other questions. These are questions which we'll not be able to probably have answers very quickly. But there are other questions which come out, like saying that you are driving automated and there is an accident which could have been avoided. Yeah. Now, the responsibility, who takes that? Automated driving itself is predicted to bring down the reduction of accidents by a huge percent. I don't know. Some studies say 50%, some studies say 80%. But it's also going to cause some accidents. Yeah. So if you really objectively, without leaving the emotion out of it, if you look at it, for all those people who are saved, you do not even know that they have been saved. Yeah. So there are maybe thousands, tens and thousands of lives which are saved. But there will be some lives which will be taken because of this technology, because it was not able to foresee that. And that will be very few. But for those people who are affected, they say, that car caused it. It's the technology which caused it. So these are all situations which we'll probably encounter in the future. Very tough to get used to this. That's why I mentioned it is a disruptive, it has the potential for really disruptive innovation in the industry.
What you are doing to cars reminds me pretty much of what Apple did to telephones when creating the iPhone. But when I think of my iPhone, I don't think of it as a phone, so taking or making phone calls is, well, just a minor use case. But in your use cases, they seem to be related pretty much to driving. So did you think about different use cases, because you're still speaking about cars, speaking about drivers, and I'm still referring to my iPhone, well, it's in the name, as a phone, but it's not a phone any longer. So did you think about that?
Let me tell you what we have thought about iPhone or an Android and our car. What we feel is we are not going to go away with this nice little thing which we have in our hand. So what we thought about are the use cases when probably you come into your car and sit in your car with your device. How can I use now the infrastructure in the car, but the functions of your phone, which means, can I have...
My question was referring to, although the iPhone is called phone, I don't use it as a phone, basically. Mm-hmm. So it means something completely different to me. It's my brain extension, in a way. And does the car, in your opinion, have the same potential to develop into something which is not referred to being as a vehicle to move you from A to B, but you know, maybe something you were referring to, like living space, like a new whatever. So I was wondering what these use cases could be.
We have looked at two aspects of it. One is the trend towards ownership of the cars themselves. Whether in the future it will be, if you really drive automatic, if you have driverless cars in the future, would you still want to own a car? They're not sure. Yeah. So the very core aspect of what you talked about, ownership, there might still be people who would like to own cars. And when they would like to own cars and when they would like to drive, we really see the third living space as a solution, which means it's like a room. It's your own room which moves from A to B. Yeah. The other part, like I mentioned, the moment it goes into a different model where you are just part of the ecosystem. There are companies which are making cars available for you, then it's no more as personalized as what you would have with your own car. I might not have answered your question regarding the use cases, but we have looked at two concrete scenarios when we were doing this.
Mr. Halady, I was wondering, you showed us all these beautiful videos and you explained that this is only a show car. So my question is, do you have some experiences in reality? Could this car already drive, or when do you expect it to drive on the street? Mm-hmm. I've got a second question. We talked about digital infrastructure and mm-hmm. We talked about the question of insurance. What are the most important fields for the government to act and to give you as a company a frame to work in? And I have a question from my colleague close to me. He was wondering who is the owner of the data you're collecting. Mm-hmm. Is it the user? Is it Bosch? Is it you? Thank you.
Okay, so there are three questions. Let me try to see whether I can sequence it right. The first one talked about was about the features. The reason why I said it's a show car is that we want to have a dialogue with the users. If they say this use case is good, then we'll be able to put it in a car inside 5 years. Yeah. Some of the features we will in fact be implementing this year in October. Yeah. So we are using this for us as a trigger for a roadmap, which we will define what we can offer. So some features will come this year, some features will come in 2 years, some features will come in 5 years. Like I mentioned, there are I can make a transition to your second question, which means about what is the kind of infrastructure which is available. What are the kind of, for example, the colleague talked about the network infrastructure. Can I have seamless connectivity everywhere I go? Can the regulations be made in such a manner that, for example, I talked about the infrastructure for the electrification. Can we have enough available charging stations with which I can say that I can move towards an electric car? Yeah. And the third question was about the data. Right now, we give the choice to the user. Yeah? The user can say whether he can provide the data to us or not. So based on the acceptance of the user, we use the data. And like I mentioned earlier, we make it very transparent to the user what we are doing with the data. And if the user wants to delete this data, we give that option and ensure that this data is deleted. And I think this is the key aspect for the user to feel much more confident and gain an acceptance also to give the data to us.
Thank you very much, Mr. Halady.
Thank you again.